The Browns have been steadfast and adamant that they have no interest in trading Myles Garrett. Even last year, when he was publicly asking for a trade, they said no and gave him a new contract. I think it's more likely that Myles Garrett gets a contract bump from the Browns this offseason than gets traded. Reported, not even Graziano, which just came out now, but also Adam Schefter said he literally phone called the Browns when they restructured Garrett's contract, and they were like, heck no, we're not trading Myles Garrett. All right, so I think this is good news.
This is where it gets uncomfortable if you're a Cleveland Browns fan, because for the first time in a while, you're hearing two completely different stories about Myles Garrett at the exact same time. One says everything is fine, he's staying, the Browns are committed. The other quietly whispers, not so fast. And when both of those narratives exist at once, that's when things usually go sideways. Here's the part nobody's talking about. Both things can be true. The Browns can have zero intention of trading Myles Garrett right now and still be setting themselves up for a future where they absolutely do. And if you don't understand that, you're going to misread everything happening behind the scenes. So let's start with the good news, because there is some real, credible, sourced information that should make Browns fans feel better today. Reports coming from legit insiders, not random speculation, not clickbait, are all pointing in the same direction. The Cleveland Browns are not trying to trade Myles Garrett. Not now, not this offseason. And that lines up with everything we've heard from inside the building.
I expect Myles to be on this roster in 2026, and that tells me the Browns are actually somewhat committed to winning right now and running this thing back while trying to revamp the offense and keep the defense intact.
Think about the timeline here. This isn't new behavior. Even when Garrett himself was publicly frustrated before, even when trade noise was louder than it is right now, the Browns didn't blink. They didn't explore deals. They didn't test the market. They shut it down and doubled down, literally by restructuring his contract. That matters, because this is where young players usually make a mistake when they analyze front office behavior. They think words matter more than actions, but in the NFL, actions are everything. And Cleveland's actions have consistently said one thing: Myles Garrett is not available. And that tells you something bigger. It tells you the Browns still believe they're in a window to compete, because you don't hold on to a generational defensive player entering his 30s if you're planning to rebuild. You move him, you cash in, you stack picks. Cleveland hasn't done that. Instead, they're trying to keep the defense intact while fixing everything else around it.
He said it's more likely that Myles gets another contract bump than gets traded. We know the money matters to Myles. We're not going to pretend like it doesn't. We're not going to pretend like that didn't influence him staying in Cleveland, and he might need a little sweetening of the deal to keep doing it.
Now here's where it gets interesting, because buried inside that same good news report is a detail that could completely change how you view this situation. There's a growing belief that instead of trading Garrett, Cleveland might actually give him another contract bump. Let that sink in. We're not talking about just keeping him. We're talking about paying him more again. And this is where it gets dangerous, because once you start talking about new money for a player like Garrett, you're not just negotiating with him anymore. You're negotiating with the entire market.
And he says that the Texans and Will Anderson Jr. are getting close to a record-breaking $50 million per year deal. An extension, ladies and gentlemen, making him the highest paid non-quarterback in the National Football League.
And right now, that market is exploding. There are rumors circulating that younger pass rushers, guys who haven't even reached Garrett's level yet, are pushing toward $50 million per year deals. That's not just a raise, that's a reset of the entire non-quarterback market. So what do you think Garrett is going to do when he sees that? He's not going to sit quietly and say, I'm good at 40. He's going to look at his resume: Defensive Player of the Year conversations, record-setting production, consistent dominance, and he's going to say, pay me like I'm the best.
You don't think Myles is going to look at that and say, hold on a sec, Will Anderson Jr. is getting $50 million a year, while Myles Garrett's getting 40? He's going to want more. He might ask for more money. And then you're going to have those issues arising again.
And honestly, he's not wrong. Here's the part nobody's talking about. This isn't just about money, it's about timing. Garrett is 30 years old. He's in that phase where every season matters more. And when you combine elite performance with limited championship success, pressure builds. Think about it. Since being drafted first overall, Garrett has only seen limited playoff success, not because he hasn't performed, but because the team around him hasn't consistently matched that level. And that's where frustration starts creeping in.
So the latest from Ari Mirov. Check this out. He says, do I think Myles Garrett's getting traded soon? I don't. But do I think the door is open for an eventual trade? I 100% do. And I think the Browns can say whatever they want to say, but actions speak louder than words.
Now let's shift to the bad news, because this is where things stop being clean and start getting complicated. Another report comes out, and this one doesn't contradict the first. It just adds context. It basically says this: Garrett isn't getting traded right now, but the door for a future trade, that door is open. Not cracked, not hypothetical.
Open. And when you hear something like that from someone plugged into league circles, you don't ignore it, because this is where it gets dangerous. The Browns might not want to trade Garrett today, but they're quietly making moves that would allow them to do it tomorrow. Let's break that down. First, there's the coaching change dynamic. Garrett had a strong relationship with the previous defensive leadership. That matters more than people think. When that situation ends badly, and by all accounts it did, it creates tension. Not necessarily public drama, but internal discomfort. And then you look at Garrett's reactions. Subtle things. Social media posts. Silence during major organizational changes. These aren't headline moments, but in the NFL, silence can be louder than words. This is where young players usually make a mistake. They wait for a player to publicly demand a trade before they believe something is wrong. But the truth is, most of the real signals happen long before that moment. Now let's talk about contracts again, because this is where the chess game really starts to reveal itself. The Browns made a very specific move with Garrett's contract structure. They adjusted timelines in a way that makes it easier to move him if they ever decide to. That's not speculation, that's strategy. By shifting option dates and financial triggers, they've created flexibility, and flexibility in the NFL usually means one thing: you're preparing for multiple outcomes. Here's the part nobody is talking about. Teams don't accidentally make contracts easier to trade. They do it on purpose. Does that mean a trade is coming? No. But does it mean they want the option available? Absolutely. Now combine that with Garrett skipping voluntary offseason activities, something he's done before, yes, but this time there's a new coaching staff in place, new systems, new voices, and he's not there. Again, not a huge deal on its own, but when you stack it with everything else, it becomes part of a pattern, and patterns are what front offices watch. This is where it gets dangerous, because now you have a situation where everything looks stable on the surface, but underneath, there are multiple exit paths already being built. And that brings us to the real question: what happens if the Browns don't win? Because right now, the entire plan is based on one assumption: that Cleveland can compete in 2026, that the offense improves, that the defense holds, that Garrett has a reason to believe in the direction of the team. But if that doesn't happen, if they start slow, if the offense struggles again, if they fall out of contention early, then everything changes. Because now you're not talking about keeping Garrett anymore. You're talking about maximizing his value. And here's the scary part: his trade value might never be higher than it is over the next year. Elite pass rusher, proven production, still in his prime window. That's the kind of asset teams give up multiple first-round picks for. This is where it gets dangerous, because the Browns might reach a point where the smartest football decision is the one fans don't want to hear: moving on. Not because Garrett isn't great, but because the timeline doesn't match anymore. And if you think that sounds crazy, remember this: we've seen teams do it before. Teams holding on to stars too long, missing their peak trade window, and then regretting it. Cleveland is trying to avoid that, so they're walking a tightrope right now. Keep Garrett, compete, and hope it works, or keep the option open just in case it doesn't. And that's why both reports matter, because the good news tells you where they are today, the bad news tells you where they might be tomorrow. And the gap between those two things, that's where everything gets decided. So now I want to hear from you. If the Browns struggle this season, if things don't go the way they're hoping, do you still keep Myles Garrett and try again? Or do you pull the trigger and trade him while his value is at its peak? Because this isn't just a roster decision anymore. This is a franchise-defining choice.